We're surrounded by the wrong kind of movies, OTT content. Indian parents are raising their sons wrong. I feel great, yeah. What's wrong with being mama's boy? I'm not lucky to have my husband. Feel privileged that I have boys. Overparenting, it makes the children too dependent on their parents. I feel like girls are more social than boys. There was an incident when my kids were very little. I think they were about 6 years old or something, and they took a pink bag to school, and all the girls started teasing them. I keep telling my children that I'm not your friend. I'm your mother. It's easier to raise boys than to raise girls. Being parents of boys and buying kitchen sets for them to play with. The mother is never allowed to drive. There are so many dangers in the virtual world out there. OTT has made it so easy for even children to get into watching adult content.
Parenting is as unique as each child is, but there are some core principles that needs to thrive. Today I'm excited to have somebody along me who brings refreshing perspective about raising next generation. I welcome Namrata Sadhwani on my show All That She Wants.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to be here.
Same here. Been looking forward to do this with you for a while. I think the right time has come today.
I always love talking, and
Uh-huh.
when it's a podcast which talks about parenting, which is my favorite subject and something that has given me so much joy over the years, I feel it's a great opportunity.
So, first, right bang on. What's an unpopular opinion that you have about parenting?
Unpopular opinion that I have about parenting, and especially when it comes to motherhood, is that you don't have to do it all. Right? For too long, society has told mothers that, we are super women and we're super moms and we're supposed to do it all. We can do it all, but we just don't want to. At this point of time, it's all about delegating. It's all about doing the things that really bring you joy, bring you happiness as a mother, the quality time that you spend with your children, and the itty bitties, you can delegate them, and you will not be a bad mother if you do that.
Okay, but do we have parents today who are ready to give quality time to their kids?
Yes, I feel this is a 21st century conundrum where, parents want to give quality time to their children, but it's become so difficult in the hustle and bustle of daily life. There's so much to do, there's so many distractions, there's so much to take care of, especially we're living in a post COVID world where, let's face it, during that time, our kids did get a lot of screen time, they got a lot of screen usage. Of course, some of it was for the good. But what matters at the end of it is that we realize that. We are the most important factor in our children's lives, and it is only us who can bring about the change that we want to see in them, and it is only us who can raise them to be responsible citizens, kind human beings, compassionate human beings with a sense of responsibility and resilience. And I think nobody else can do that job. Our kids didn't ask to be born, we brought them into the world, so it is our responsibility to do 100% by them.
So true. I love this line. What you just mentioned. It's nothing is in our hands.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you are a child who was born in 80s.
Right.
How were you parented, and how different is it from you are parenting and raising your sons?
Oh, I feel there's a world of difference, because that those 80 cliches where the mom would just give you a look and you would have to just sort of go along with whatever they said, or you never spoke back to your father even respectfully, like it was not done. And I was that child, like I was like a straight A student all the time. I never questioned anything that my parents told me to do. I never asked them for anything extra. And if my parents said that this thing had to be done, I would do it without asking any questions. The generation now is not like that. Like, for everything that I have to get my kids to do, I have to understand the why of it first, because I know that that question is going to come from my kids, that why are we doing this, or why are we supposed to do this, or why do you want us to do this. So I, as a parent, know that I have to be prepared for that question, and I have to know how to answer it. And it is completely all right for them to ask this question. Earlier on, it was frowned upon when children asked too many questions. And the parents were just expected to be the rule makers in the house. But now I feel it is important for children also to have that sense of curiosity, and it's okay for them to ask questions and for them to ask why.
Correct. Curiosity builds and gets them to a next level
Yes.
where they understand and learn more things.
Yeah, blind obedience is no longer the factor that we must take into consideration while parenting. It is good if our children ask questions. It builds the sense of curiosity in them, and it will also teach them to be more independent, because they will also start looking for answers themselves.
So, what's one old school rule that you want to keep with you or you have kept with you, and one that you have completely thrown away?
The old school rule that I have kept with me is that I keep telling my children that I'm not your friend. I'm your mother. And your father is your father. He's not your friend. You have different boundaries with us as parents, and you have different boundaries with your friends. So let's not mix the two relationships. As a parent, I know what I'm supposed to do for my child. And of course, the lines of conversation between us are always open. My kids know that they can come and talk to me about everything, but I will advise them as a parent and not as a friend. And I think it's very important for us these days. I think we get too caught up in, like, parents should be friends, parents should be friends. Of course we should be friends, but we should also know the sense of responsibility we have as a parent, as an adult in our kids lives, right? So that's the thing that I don't agree with these new age kids. And the one that I sort of want to break is this thing that I already said about asking questions and not believing in blind disobedience. I feel it's great when my kids ask questions. I feel it's great when my kids even show some signs of rebellion, because they're finding themselves, they're finding their true personalities, and slight rebellion is okay along the way if it's helping them out in the long run.
Okay. So, do you think parenting is only about raising a child, or also parents grow along with them?
Oh, of course, parents grow. As a mother, I know how much growth I have seen in the last 12 years that I have been a mother. It's changed my life completely. I had a very well settled job, which, I gave up once I had my children. I found new passion, I found a new career, and all this growth has happened in me personally and professionally because I've had my kids. And I think this is because, as a parent, you want to make the world a better place once you have your children, because you want to leave the world better than what you found it once you have your children, so that they're more comfortable and they're happier in the world that has been left to them. So I think you become more responsible, you become more this is word woke, you become more woke as a parent, you become more compassionate as a parent. And I feel these are the qualities which then got passed on to our children as well.
So, after how many years of their birth, you got back to work?
So my kids, actually within a year I got back to work, but not like full time work. I got back to freelance work, and like I said, I found my passion. So I am an architect by education, but I stopped practicing once I got pregnant, and I had because it was a very high risk pregnancy. I have twin boys. I was on bed rest for most of my pregnancy, so I had to give up my job. And at that time, I felt like the world was coming to an end because I wasn't working, and I felt like my identity would be, compromised because I decided to have kids. But then once they came, and I realized that I found my true passion in writing about parenting, about motherhood, and that just gave me a new lease of life and a new career. And I think I went back to working full time, maybe 4 years after they were born, and now I'm just working continuously.
I'm sure you often hear about this phrase, mama's boy.
Yes.
How do you feel about it?
I feel great. Yeah, what's wrong with being mama's boy? I feel like this is a term which has been so negatively seen in the media. But if your child is a mama's boy, if your son is a mama's boy, if he does come to you for advice, if he does come to you for any kind of problems, for any kind of issues that he's facing, and if he needs advice about what is going on in life, and what he needs to talk about, I feel it's great if he's called a mama's boy. Now, of course, in if he's too dependent on you, then that's a problem. I wouldn't encourage that in any way. But if it's a self-thinking child who comes to his mother every time he needs advice, I feel it's great to be a mama's boy.
Okay. Now that you're talking about this, there's something which is very common these days, overparenting.
Yes.
Parents are there to solve every problem the child is going through.
Right.
So, is it not making them dependent on them completely?
Yes, 100%. And I'll tell you, because I am very old school as a parent. Of course, I try to bring in my own perspectives to it also. I try to break the cycle wherever I find something which was not done right in my childhood. And I don't blame my parents for it, because they did the best in the circumstances they had. But now the world is different. We need to parent our kids differently. The world is not the same as it was when I was growing up. So, overparenting, of course, it makes the children too dependent on their parents, I feel, and they're not able to think for themselves and find real world solutions for themselves. So, I think this is just one of the one of the many things that we need to do as a parent is to find the balance between gentle parenting, between over parenting, between just being around for your children at all times so that they know that they can come to you with any problem, but not being over dependent on you. You have to, of course, give them the independence to find their own solutions as well.
Okay. And what is a father's role in all this?
As important as a mother's. I mean, there is no there are no two ways about it. It's the 21st century, and I think fathers everywhere are now owning up to the responsibility of being full-time fathers and not part-time available fathers as they were in the past, because parenting is a shared responsibility. Like I always used to hear this when my kids were younger. My husband is a very, very hands-on dad, right? I don't like using this term also, hands-on dad, because that's what the dad is supposed to do. Correct. But I used to hear this a lot when my kids were younger. Oh, you're so lucky, he changes nappies. Oh, you're so lucky, you can go out of the house. He's babysitting the children. And I used to tell everybody around me, he's not babysitting the children. He's just looking after his own children. They're a part of him too. Exactly. And so I used to find that very funny. In fact, one of the earliest blog posts that I wrote was, I'm not lucky to have my husband, because it's a two-way partnership. Like parenting is equally to be split between the mother and the father. In the early years of a child's life, I think the only thing that a father can't do is feed the child. That's a responsibility of the mother. But then everything else can be done by the father and should be done by the father.
Definitely. I think most of the parents also shy knowing the fact that they would be given such names.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like it is a great disservice to the fathers as well. Like, if you're going to congratulate them every time for just doing their job, I think you're not letting them live up to their role as fathers. So I think it's an insult to them as well. Like, you're questioning their intelligence. Like, if they're meant to do these things as a father and you're congratulating them for it, you're insulting their intelligence. I feel that definitely should not be done. And just like you praise a mother for doing a good job, you can praise a father for also doing a good job. The fathers hear more of the praise, but I think the moms should hear more of it too.
You have twin boys.
Yes.
When did you first notice parenting boys is different from raising girls based on your friends, family experiences?
I think, we try to break the stereotype of this boy versus girl parenting, but let's face it, biologically, boys and girls are different, and they're built differently. So I feel like when I used to talk with my friends who are also moms of daughters, they would have very calming things to say about their daughters. Like, their daughters used to do crafts, and they used to, play with other children, and eat their meals, without too much trouble and things like that. And I used to always have stories like, my son pushed him, and they did somersaults, and they flew off the sofa, and they jumped off the table, and I would have stories like that. So I feel maybe that's the one difference physically that I noticed between my friends who were raising girls and I was raising boys. But other than that, I feel like whether it was a meal times, whether it was a toddler phases, whether all of that was similar in girls and boys. As they're growing up, I feel like girls are more social than boys. Okay. When so girls will find their friends. Like, we're a part of a huge community. So I think the girls in my building, even the ones who are the same age as my kids, they find their friends in the building. They're going around to each other's houses, and they're going down for walks and things like that. Like, with boys, it's more like, you have to egg them. Can you go find your friends? Can you go, maybe go cycling with them or go swimming with them or something like that. So I think the girls are a little more social than boys. So that's the difference that I've noticed. Although I feel like I'm very lucky to have boys, and I'll say this in not with the perspective of, boys are superior than girls, because I really don't think like that. Like, every gender is equal in the eyes of God. But I just feel like, with the infrastructure, the way our country is built, the way the infrastructure is built, I feel it's easier to raise boys than to raise girls. And I feel privileged that I have boys and I'm raising them in this country, because it's just easier to raise boys. Very simple example is when I take my kids for their table tennis tournaments. They are national level table tennis players. The quality of the washrooms everywhere is so bad. And I feel so bad for the girls who have to go use the washrooms, because with boys, it's so much easier. I don't know if this is too much information, but this is just, one of those many differences that come in when you're raising boys and when you're raising girls.
Did you ever wish having a girl child?
Yes. Earlier on, like, and I'm being very honest, like, I always used to dream of a girl child. always. And when I found out I was having twins, prayed fervently that I would have at least एक लड़की तो आ जाए. Even when I was going for my delivery, like I had like a nice little dress which I had bought in the hope that I will have a girl, and I put it in the side of my delivery bag, and I said, okay, I told my co-sister who was coming with me that अगर लड़की होगी तो please उसको लड़कों के कपड़ों में मत डालना, just put this on her. And because I have been surrounded by boys like all my life, everyone in my family has had boys. My co-sister has two boys, my own bhabhi has two boys. So I was just like, okay, one girl maybe, to sort of complete the equation. That was earlier on. But now, when you grow in parenting, like you spoke about growth of a parent, you grow in parenting and you realize that kids are kids, whether they're girls or boys, and raising them is just the biggest joy, whatever gender they are.
So do you believe parenting boys and girls needs to be different?
100%. 100%, because with boys, not different in a way that you're teaching them different responsibilities, but different in a way that the world is currently not set up to parent boys and girls equally. Although that is the world we are aiming towards. We're aiming towards an equal society. We're aiming towards a world where boys and girls are treated equally, right? But we are still to get there. So while we get there, it is our responsibility as parents to parent boys and girls differently. With the boys, we have to tell them that breaking stereotypes is your responsibility. That you are no more superior than a girl. You are equally responsible for the home chores as a girl is. You are not to be served by a girl. You have to go pick up that glass of water for yourself and not wait for anybody to come and give it to you. And for the girls, we have to tell them that you don't have to take any nonsense that comes your way. True. You have to stand up for yourself, because you are as good as the second person out there, whether that second person is a boy or a girl. So I think that's where the difference lies when you're parenting boys and girls. This smashing of the patriarchy is very important in both genders.
So let's talk about masculinity, gender roles, and feminism.
Right.
How have you walked your boys through this path? Okay. And what are your conversations like with them?
Right. So I feel this is, and thank you for bringing up this topic, because this is very, very important and we must talk about it. So I am very privileged to be married, and I still say this, that I'm very privileged to be married into a family where traditional gender roles have never been followed. So whether it is the men cooking, or whether it is the men doing the laundry, whether it is the women going out to work, whether it is a women taking the responsibility for what investments have to be made. I think I have been married into a family where none of these gender roles, have played a very important role. And I call myself privileged because that's what my kids are seeing while growing up. So they are not seeing any traditional gender roles being followed. So for them, there are no traditional gender roles. They know that, everything is equally, everybody is equally responsible for the house. Equal responsibility is the name of the game. But where I face the challenge is when they go to school and they meet other kids who are not a part of a similar setup. From simple things like, pink is for girls and blue is for boys. I remember there was an incident when my kids were very little. I think they were about 6 years old or something, and they took a pink bag to school. And all the girls started teasing them that, why are you a girl? Why are you carrying a pink bag? And I had to go to the school and tell the teacher that this is not, we cannot allow this. And then I actually gave a talk in the school about why, this should not be allowed. And I got the parents together and I said that it is our responsibility to raise children to break the stereotypes. We cannot let them, follow the same thing. So every time my kids see something different being done at home than what is being told to them in their conversations with their friends, they come and ask me about it, that they did this, why are you doing this? They did this, why are we doing this? So that's where I feel my role as a parent is important, to tell them why we're doing the things the way we are, and all of us are equally responsible for smashing patriarchy, smashing down these traditional masculine roles, and bringing up children believing that they are equally responsible for everything in the house.
Would you give me some example of how did you start a conversation, or how was your approach toward these topics?
Yep.
And what led and where these conversations led to with them?
Yeah. So I think for us, it started as young as us being parents of boys and buying kitchen sets for them to play with. We had full-fledged kitchen sets, we had an ironing table,
Mhm.
we had a microwave. So when they actually grew up and they went into the kitchen, they knew what to do, because these are the things that shaped them.
Correct.
Introducing them to the right kind of books is very, very important, because for kids read, kids see visuals, and they understand what is being said in the visuals. So to introduce them to the right world concepts with the right kind of books is very, very important.
True.
And like for us, the conversation always used to be like, okay, Papa's making your tiffin, can you go, bring it and put it in your bag? And they would be like, Mama, can you go bring it? And I said, no, I can't, because it's your tiffin, you have to go bring it.
True.
Something as simple as that, whether it is to see me, something as simple as my husband sitting in the passenger seat and me driving. For them, that was like, oh my God, Dash's mother is never allowed to drive. So I said, okay, which one do you think is right? Am I driving? Is that a good thing? Or do you think that is right, that, she's not allowed to drive? So he says, no. I mean, you should be free to do what you want to do. Why should anybody stop you from doing whatever you want to do? So it's in everyday situations, everyday conversations that we bring about this change. And we
Okay.
cannot let things slide. Like if you see something wrong, maybe not call it out immediately, but call it out in the near future, so that you know that it's not leaving an impact on their mind.
Have you forced anything on them?
Not at all. I think this is not the generation that you can force anything on, any kind of ideas on. You can't force it on them. You have to reason with them. You have to help them understand why you are saying what you are, and then help them get to the decision themselves. You can't force anything on this generation.
So, do you also tell your sons it's okay to cry, and how do they react?
Oh, yes, of course. They've been called sissies in school
Okay.
because they would cry at the drop of a hat when something happened. And like I said, I've always had very positive examples around them. So they know that it's okay to cry. And one of the earliest books I actually got them was about a child who's a boy who cries because he's lost his pet dog or something like that. That was a story in the book. And so this is what I said, the real world examples that they see around, and the kind of literature they see around. I tell them that it's okay to cry if you're feeling bad. You don't have to bottle up your emotions, and you can talk about anything. Sometimes it becomes very inconvenient for me as an individual, because I'll be in the middle of some very important work, and they'll come and tell me, we need to tell you this right now. Right now, like I'll be like, just wait 1 second, let me just send off this one email, and I'll come back to you. But they're like, no, right now, and I try to find the balance between, okay, putting off my work and then giving them the attention that they deserve, because this is what leads to evolution of emotions in them also.
Yes.
And what they do eventually becomes the regulators for them. So this is how I feel like it's okay to tell boys, that you can cry, you can have a discussion, and you should also not let them believe that their word is a law. Like sometimes in jokingly I tell them, that when I ask them to do something and they say why, sometimes I jokingly tell them that, because I said so and that's why. So they know that I'm saying it as a joke, but sometimes they use it on me, and I'm like, no, you can't do that. You have to regulate your emotions, and you have to give me the reasons.
So, how do their friends respond or react to this when they see or hear that, oh, you cried for this,
Yeah,
being a boy?
yeah.
So, how would they reciprocate to that?
I feel thankfully the world is changing now, so it's no longer seen as as inappropriate when boys cry, which is great. But there are, of course, examples. Like I said, my boys have been called sissies in school and things like that. So I just tell them that it's fine. It's their problem if they think you're sissies. You know that you're not a sissy.
True.
You know it. You know that you're a person with a character, and you cry to express your emotions, and that's completely okay. If they're calling you sissies, that's their problem. It's not yours.
Wonderful. That's a great advice. And
Yeah.
I wish every parent picks this up, especially parents of boys.
Yeah, it's very important for us to tell them that, to build a sense of self-respect in them, so that they see themselves as the change makers,
True.
and also wherever possible applaud them for it, because it's not easy for them to stand up with amongst their friends and say that this is what we are doing and this is what we think is right, especially if they met with a lot of opposition. So if they're doing that, kudos, and we should give them the applause for it as well.
So, if I can ask you this one question, is this because of the upbringing that you have brought them in a joint family, or is it just you as a parent who have taken that effort to put this in them?
I think it's a little bit of both because I'm married into a family which, like I said, there's no difference in the genders in the
Mhm.
family. In fact, we are all we are all working individuals within our family, and so it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of me as an individual because I've also grown and I've also evolved
Mhm.
as a person, and I feel like I'm putting those thoughts and I'm putting those ideas in my kids' heads also. But what is most important is the environment in which you bring up your child. If that's a very happy, secure, positive, uplifting environment, I think those things automatically build on in our children as well, whether they're girls or whether they're boys.
Mm.
If you sort of bring them up in a very cloistered environment where conversations are not free to happen,
Mhm.
I think they grow up with a sense of believing that whatever popular media shows them is right, right? But the example that you set for them is what is eventually going to stay with them. So I think that's a little bit of mix of both of it.
So, do you think at a larger picture, Indian parents are raising their sons wrong? Who and what is to be blamed for this?
Indian parents are raising their sons wrong. I don't want to make generalized statements like this because I
Mhm.
really feel that the change is coming, but we're still living in a patriarchal society, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So we really need to do so whatever you're doing, do more of it to sort of break the shackles of that patriarchy and get everybody to believe that you have to raise boys to believe that they are equal to girls and girls to believe that they're equal to boys.
Mhm.
So I think it's a two-way street. We have to understand, and we also have to understand where our limitations are, because we're seeing so much in popular media about how boys are still more superior, and I really feel like
Yes.
we're surrounded by the wrong kind of films, movies, OTT content, books also, spreading the stereotypes, and I feel that's such a tragedy, especially in a country like ours where we have so many people and these are great mediums to introduce positive change,
True.
but unfortunately it's not happening at the speed at which it should be happening. So because of all that we see around us, we have to take double the efforts to sort of tell our kids and raise them up the right way. So
Mhm.
I really feel that we all have to make the effort, whether it's parents or whether it's not parents. I think it's the responsibility of everybody to raise more responsible citizens.
Okay. How do you think we can change this mindset?
By actually, there's two things, right? One is by always having open lines of conversations with our kids,
Mhm.
because they see something, and also helping them develop the natural curiosity. So if they see something which they don't agree with, or if they see something which is different from what they believe in, they should always come and have a conversation with parents about it, like, hey, this is something I saw and I didn't like it, and what do you think about it? And have reasonable discussions with your children, and don't try to impose your viewpoint on them.
Mhm.
That is one thing. Secondly, always try to limit, or always try to at least screen a little bit of what they're seeing, what
Mhm.
they're reading, the kind of people they're interacting with, because you hold that power in your child's life.
Mhm.
So if you know that there is something which is going to really negatively impact their line of thinking, maybe just keep them away from it and
Mhm.
use your role as a parent to make that happen.
Okay. So let's talk about exposure,
Okay,
the internet and the digital screens.
right.
What does screen time look like in your house?
So when it comes to screen time, I feel like my kids are really too busy, and I'll tell you why. I got this advice from one of my husband's cousins very early on, even before I had my kids, and I
Mhm.
used to always admire the way that she was bringing up her kids, in a cross-cultural marriage, bringing them up in the US. They were always very determined, very focused, and I used to ask her that, how are you managing?
Mhm.
And she said, you have to keep them so busy doing the things that they love that they don't have time for any distractions and diversions. And I think that really stuck to me, and I feel like I have followed that throughout with my kids, especially now, that they've entered their teens. Since the time, I think they found a love for their sport in table tennis.
Mhm.
They randomly started watching table tennis videos on YouTube.
Okay.
Then they said, we want to pursue it. We got them rackets. They started pursuing it as a hobby. Then they said, we want to do it more seriously, so we put them in coaching under a very good coach. And then they started playing inter school, they started playing state level, and now they are national level TT players.
Great.
So what this has led to in their lives is a sense of busyness, but it is effective busyness, because they're going for coaching, then they go to school, then they come back, they practice their game, they do their
Mhm.
homework, they have their meals, and then they sleep because they're too
Okay.
tired to do anything else.
Yes.
So I feel like if your children are occupied effectively,
Mm-hmm.
they will not go towards the screens. It's
Mm-hmm.
only if they have more time, they don't know what to do with their time, or they are
Mm-hmm.
unnecessarily distracted, will they go towards the screen. So
Okay.
currently, my kids don't have their own phones. And
Okay.
even if the screens that they have,
Mm-hmm.
screen time that they have is very limited because they don't have time during the day. There's only
Mm-hmm.
24 hours, and they know that if they
Mm-hmm.
have to play their sport, they have to sleep well, they have
Mm-hmm.
to exercise,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't have time for the screen. So whatever screen time they get is also
Mm-hmm.
very effectively used.
Okay.
They research how they can make the game better. They
Mm-hmm.
research how better mindset can help in better games. So even
Mm-hmm.
the screen time that they get is very, very positive.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say like screen time is negative, but it is how you regulate the screen time is what is very
Mm-hmm.
important. Secondly, I feel like as parents, we have to set the right example when it comes to screen time. If we are constantly on our phones, we cannot
Mm.
expect our children
True.
not take that into consideration, because they may just
Exactly.
turn around and tell you that, listen, you're always
Mm.
on your phone, why are you objecting when I'm
Mm.
on my phone? So the idea is to keep them busy, to keep them not busy, I would say keep them effectively engaged
Mm-hmm.
in activities and in hobbies that
Mm.
add to their character, that add to their life, so that they don't have time for screens.
True.
Yeah.
So basically, they learn what they see.
Yes, of course, that is 100% for everything. And this
Mm.
is what I've been saying right from the beginning.
Mm.
Whatever they see in the environment around them, that is what is going to stick with them, and that is what they're going to
Mm.
learn from. So it is
Okay.
our responsibility as parents to provide that positive
Mm-hmm.
upbringing, positive environment to them so that they grow like that.
So, did you ever find a need to supervise them on this?
Always, I in this matter, when it comes to screen time, I
Uh-huh.
am that parent who will 100% supervise what they're doing. And thankfully, I'm a little technologically oriented as well.
Okay.
So I know what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and if I find them veering
Mm-hmm.
slightly away from the path that they're supposed to be at screen time, I don't immediately call them out on it. I wait for them to come and tell me why they were doing what they did, and if they don't tell me, I ask them, that what you was watching this, you were not supposed to be watching this, because this is not meant for you at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell me, they got curious because they heard about it from their friends, or they saw it, they saw something about it in the newspaper, and but we didn't really like it, and so we're probably not going to do it again. So
Okay.
this is what the conversation usually ends up. But
Mm-hmm.
I 100%, and it's very, very important for us as parents to 100% monitor the screen time of our children, because there are so many dangers in the virtual world out there.
True.
And with AI taking over
Mhm.
everybody's lives, it is
Mhm.
even more important to be very, very stringent with your children's screen time, and obviously screen whatever they are seeing, and always keep a track of their online activities. That's the
Okay.
least we can do as parents.
Is there something that's completely off list that's something that is off list in your house?
Yes, something that's off list in my house is watching content online or in theaters which is not meant for their age limit.
Okay.
So I feel that's very, very important, because OTT has made it so easy for even children to get into watching adult content which is not really meant for them at that age. Like my kids keep coming and asking me, like they're 12. So
Mhm.
mama, this is 14 plus, can we watch this? This is 16 plus, can we watch this? And I said, no, are you 14? You're not 14 yet, so how can you watch it? You're not 16 yet, so how can you watch it? Especially films that we know have content which is not meant for kids
Mhm.
of that age, you can keep them away from it. I
Mhm.
see that a lot with parents just giving into their children's demands, which they shouldn't. And
Mhm.
because we don't know how this will affect them. The ratings are there for a reason,
Correct.
and let's respect that, and let's give our children the innocence of their childhood. They deserve that. The world is anyways going to catch up with them as they grow older, so let
Mhm.
them maintain their innocence for as long as they can. So this is something which is completely off limits in my house. If it's something which is not meant for your age, you don't do it, and that's it. That's the blanket rule.
Okay.
Whether it's books, whether it's content on TV, whether it's theaters, whether it's places where you go out, if it's not meant for kids, they're not going there.
How would you want to respond to somebody who's stubborn and not willing or wanting to leave the idea of not doing what has been told at school or friends from whoever?
At some point, I feel like I was a very stubborn child,
Mhm.
and I always, now that I'm raising my own children, who sometimes can, all children are stubborn sometimes.
True.
Now that I'm raising my own children, I have so much more sympathy for my parents because of the child that they were raising. But See, stubbornness comes because I feel like we don't give our children the respect that they deserve and the kind of understanding that they deserve. And if they're curious, they ask questions, we don't answer them properly, that's when the stubbornness comes from.
Okay.
So I think if we are able to sort of help them go through that path of answering their questions and giving them proper sound reasons as to why they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, what they're being stubborn about, I think the problem can be solved. Still, if they're being stubborn, okay, as a parent, then this is the only thing that you can do is, okay, go ahead and do it, and then let's face the consequences together, because this is also a way of learning.
True.
So sometimes you have to give in, and that's completely okay, as long as you're there to sort of be with them in the background.
Okay. So let's talk about twin parenting. How
My
would
favorite
you
topic.
how would you sum up, or what's a memorable moment that you want to sum up with your twins?
Twin parenting is absolute chaos, and let's not take away from that at all. There are a lot of people who ask me, that, oh, twins, how did you manage? And I keep telling everybody I didn't sleep for the first 2 years of their life, and that's how I managed compulsively. But the memorable moment was when, I think, on their first birthday, like we had a family celebration,
Okay.
and I just held my children in my arms and I said, okay, I managed to keep you guys alive for 1 year. You are thriving, you are growing, you are happy, well settled kids. Now that we've done it for 1 year, I think I can do this for life, So that was
Okay.
like the testing time, the first 1 year of their life, because you yourself are growing so much as a mother. You yourself are fighting the stereotypes. You yourself are fighting the hormone issues, the change of hormones. Plus, then you've got the additional responsibility of 2 children whom you're supposed to bring up. And so when we got to that point of their first birthday, I felt like it was like a wonderful milestone. And I felt like, okay, like I've done it. I've kept them alive for 1 year, and now I can do this for the rest of my life. So that was like the major milestone moment.
Okay.
But twin parenting is chaos because, and I'll tell you why it's chaos also, because too many people around us believe in the Bollywood cliche of twins,
Correct.
that एक को बुखार होता है तो दूसरे को होता है,
Correct.
एक को मार लगती है तो
Identical
दूसरे को
twins.
दर्द होता है, and things like that. But that is not true. My twins are fraternal twins, so they don't even look like twins. But I had everybody coming in and telling them, oh, they look exactly the same. And I said, no, they don't look the same. You're being fed a stereotype. Break away from that. So, but it's just like raising 2 different boys.
Okay.
Earlier on, of course, you do the whole twin thing, like, you give them matching clothes and you give them matching this and matching that, and, raise all those joys of twin parenting. But now it's like raising 2 completely different individuals. And that's the takeaway of twin parenting, because they are twins, they are related. Of course, they're going to be brothers for life. But you also have to remember that they're their own individual personalities, and you cannot let them fuse into one personality.
True.
Which is why I've always kept them in different classes in school, so that they each make their own set of friends. And they are never compared, that तुम्हारे भाई ने तो ये किया, तुमने ये नहीं किया. They're never compared. And I've also given them, like, we've given them names which don't sound alike.
Okay.
Most twins, they sound alike, but my twins, they sound completely different, like Advait and Agastya. So
Okay.
that way is also, nobody can club them together and, be like, okay, you're like one big personality as opposed to 2 different growing, thriving personalities. And I think that's the most important thing to remember about twin parenting. It's that
Okay.
you're raising individuals, you're not raising one big personality.
Okay. Just now you spoke about comparisons.
Yes.
That is at school. That is manageable. But what do you do something which is outside school when people start comparing them with each other? Being twins, this is more often seen.
Right.
ये छोटा ऐसा है, बड़ा ऐसा नहीं है.
Right.
Or to anyone else. How
Yeah.
do you respond to these situations? And
I think this is not just seen in twins. I think in all siblings it is seen. That there's a lot of comparison which happens between siblings, between twins more, because you expect them to be. Because I think this is more again that popular stereotype that we've been fed, that they're supposed to do everything the same. They're supposed to like the same things. They're supposed to dislike the same things. But it's actually all about going and clearing the misconception and saying that they're not the same people. They're different personalities. They're different individuals, so it's okay for them to be different from each other.
Okay.
Each one of them has their own strengths. Each one of them has their own weaknesses, and it's best to play up to their strengths and try to control the weaknesses. So
Mhm.
it's all about also being kind to the people who are judging, because they also don't know, they don't know any better, they're naturally assuming that things are different, things are the same between twins. We also have to help them break the stereotype that it's not like that and it's two different personalities that you're raising.
We cannot talk about twin parenting without counting or talking about costs. Certainly, it's an expensive affair.
Yes.
What do you have to tell about this?
Yes, 100%. Because people say that, oh my God, you got two for the price of one. And I'd be like, no, I got two for the price of four, is what I'm trying to see.
Uh-huh.
Because usually, when a couple plans for more than one child, they have one child and then they can, grow with that child and then take the decision if they want to have another child or not. And even when they want to have another child, they have the sort of long-term planning for it. They can set their financial goals.
True.
Whereas in the case of twin parenting, you can't do anything like that because it's not a choice. Like you're handed
Exactly.
it on a platter that, okay, now you have two children and you have to raise them no matter what happens. And it's also two for the price of four, I said, because you don't have that time in between two children to sort of, grow your finances,
True.
grow emotionally, grow mentally. It's two at the same time. So you're raising both of them. You're at the cost that comes because you can't do with one car seat. You need two car seats.
You do.
You need two baby beds. You need two of everything. So it's basically double the cost of everything. You have to put them in school together. You have to pay the fees together. So of course it requires a completely different level of financial planning than you would, with two children who are born a few years apart. But it's all about managing your everything better, your finances better, your health better, your priorities better, letting go of things which which are not important, and maybe coming back to them in the future when you have better time for it.
Okay.
So there's a very like an example that I can say that when we used to go for the vaccinations, of course there's a set of compulsory vaccines and there's also a set of like extra vaccines which you can take for extra precautions.
Correct.
So there was one particular vaccine which was quite expensive. So I actually consulted with like a couple of doctors to sort of understand if this was actually needed for both of my children, because at that time it was a very heavy cost to bear for both of us. So my husband, of course, we had a talk amongst ourselves and we said, if it's important, then we have to give it to the kids. So the doctor helped me understand that it's just one meal less outside for your family, but it's giving your kids the lifetime of protection. And I felt like that was a beautiful way to prioritize, that at that point, that is important. Your meals outside will come later. You can always go back to them later. But the vaccine has to be given now, and that's your priority. So I feel like in twin parenting, a lot of the financial decisions that you take are all about priorities. And the sooner we realize that, the better it is.
Okay. So what about the cost of education, especially Hyderabad being in news with the exorbitant fees?
Right.
How have your experiences been with this?
So, of course, every end of the spectrum is a little more expensive when you're raising twins. But when it comes to the schools, of course, schools in Hyderabad are expensive. But you also have to pick the kind of school that you want your kids to go to, the kind of environment that you want your kids to grow in, the kind of friends you want your kids to make, because these are the considerations you take when you choose the right school for your kids. For me, my two considerations were when I was choosing a school, when we were choosing a school, my husband and I together, for our kids, there were only two considerations. One was that the school should be within 5 kilometers of our house.
Okay.
We don't want our children to spend hours and hours stuck in traffic and in commute.
It's
in the
quite
school buses.
seen today.
Yeah, we don't want that. So we want the school within 5 kilometers of our house. And the second consideration was that we want the school to have a huge playground.
Okay.
So that the kids can run around, they run to school, they run back from school, they're running during their lunch breaks, because all this is helping in building their physical strength, building their stamina, and also this helps in socializing. Schools with bigger playgrounds have more social kids than schools which don't have playgrounds at all. So these were my two considerations. And the school that I found, it's a traditional school, and thankfully the fees is not as much as those of those really exorbitant schools which are on the other side of the city. So but of course that's what worked out best for us. Every family has to choose what works best for them.
Okay.
and what is the criteria they're looking at when they pick a school for their kids, and whether they're able to financially afford that or no. I think
Mhm.
there's no point, because a very wise teacher once told me that till 8th grade, kids are the same in every school.
Mhm.
It's every school, and you
Mhm.
putting your children in a different kind of school is only going to help them build a different environment. Do
Mhm.
you really want your kids to be a part of that environment? Is what you feel like, what you should be taking upon, the kind of friends they make, the kind of lifestyle they get used to, the kind of
Mhm.
comfort they get used to. Those are the things which are building on in those years.
Mhm.
You figure out what you want for your kids and then pick a school accordingly.
Okay. So, what according to you should be a right decision taken by parents? A good school versus travel.
A good school versus travel. Oh my God, this is a very, very difficult question. I feel
Mhm.
like a good school, because that's
Okay.
going to set their base for life,
Mhm.
and that's the place where they spend the most amount of time after their home. So
Mhm.
it's important to pick a good school for your kids, one
Mhm.
which gives them stability and one
Mhm.
which helps them grow every part of their personality.
Okay. Does good school mean only international schools?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Every system of schooling has its own pros and cons.
Mhm.
You figure out which pros and cons work for you and pick a school accordingly. My kids are not in an international school.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to send
Mhm.
them to an international school.
Why not?
Because I feel like I am, and this is my issue, this is my perspective as a middle class
Mhm.
parent, that an international school really sets them up for a life which may not be within their means at this point of time. Of course,
Mhm.
they can work towards a better life, but it is sort of setting them up for a little bit more of comfort with, they most international schools don't have
Mhm.
examinations.
Yes.
Most of them, have more of like extracurricular activities. I'm already giving my kids enough extracurricular activities. I don't
Mhm.
need the school to provide that for them.
Mhm.
Plus, I also feel as a middle class parent, like I cannot do away with exams, because eventually my kids are going to write exams when they grow older, when they go
Mhm.
into universities. So to get them onto that right path, we've always been a very educationally focused family, as long as having along with having an interest in sports as well. So the
Okay.
right kind of education for me, in my perspective, only comes in a traditional school versus an
Mhm.
international school. I may be wrong, but this is just
Mhm.
my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It's your opinion
Yep.
because you know the best for your kids.
Yes.
How do you guide your sons through friendship, especially when you know that the influence might not align with your values?
Right. Most of the time it doesn't. we have
Such a
to make
common thing every parent
we
has to
have to
say.
just make our peace with that as a parent,
Mhm.
and hope for the best, that the upbringing that you're giving your children
Mhm.
is sort of holding them in good stead, even when they make the friends that
Mhm.
you wouldn't necessarily pick for them.
Mhm.
Although I do feel that with the right kind of with the friends that they choose, it's also a big learning for us, because
Mhm.
um, I end up learning so much about my kids uh, from their friends, and I end up
Mhm.
learning so many new things because of the friends that they have, and it makes me also a better person. Like, it makes me more of a compassionate person.
Mhm.
Um, like, for example, we are Sindhi, so we are a non-vegetarian eating community,
Okay.
right? I don't personally eat non-veg, but
Mhm.
that is my choice. But all of my friends, all of my kids' friends in schools are all Jains and Marwadis.
Okay.
So because of that, my kids are not inclined towards eating non-veg, because
Mhm.
they hear about it, and they hear
Mhm.
about the things that their friends do, and I feel that's okay. It's them making a compassionate choice, even though
Mhm.
they've been influenced by their friends. It's
Mhm.
them making a compassionate choice. So why not?
Exactly.
So in some ways, it's great that they choose their own friends, because we also get to learn a lot.
Mhm.
Of course, when they start to go haywire, or when they start to go in the wrong company. I don't like using
Mhm.
that word wrong company, because every child is still
Exactly.
growing and still, like, finding their way. But
Mhm.
like, if I find them teetering too much off the path, then you try to bring them back and say that
Mhm.
maybe you're not supposed to be with this person at
Mhm.
this time. Maybe when things are getting better, or when he's more settled, or when she is willing to offer you more as a friend, maybe you can go back to the friendship at that time. Although
Okay.
that hasn't happened as yet, so we've
Okay.
been very lucky when it comes to friends.
Okay. What if somebody is coming up to you and asking a suggestion? What would you give?
For the friends,
Against, yeah, against your sons have been obedient and they are following what you are
yeah,
asking them to. But
yeah.
Somebody who comes and asks you for a suggestion which is going against your
Yeah.
values, what would you suggest?
I would say leave the kids and help them find their own path, because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, your child is befriending another child. You don't know the circumstances that are surrounding that child, why that child is the way he or she is.
Okay.
Maybe if you're very, very concerned, have a talk with the parents of that child. Don't approach the child directly, because you don't know what's going on in their lives. Maybe approach the parents of the child. Maybe try to see, what is going on in that child's life, and if you can help to provide a solution for that. And at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. If your child
Mhm.
is making mistakes, sometimes you just got to go with the flow and help them to learn from those mistakes as well, and just be there as a parent to hold them when they come
Mhm.
back to you, because they will come back to you.
True, they will, they will.
Yeah.
So, what's one parenting mistake that you still think about, and what has that taught you?
Oh, parenting mistakes, there have been so many. Do I have to just say one?
You can say the best ones.
So
Learnings might be
yeah,
different.
learnings, I
So,
think there's been a lot of learnings as as a parent.
Mhm.
I was a very, very angry mother, because
Mhm.
I used to feel that my children and their behavior was a reflection of me as a parent and
Mhm.
me as a mother. But I spoke to, very close friends of mine who helped me understand that their behavior is not a reflection of your behavior as a mother.
Okay.
And I think that really helped me break a lot of shackles, because uh, we as mothers, we want to believe that we are the whole and soul guiding force in our children's lives, when it's actually not like that. We are the most important, yes, but there are a lot of other guiding forces as well, and each of them needs to be given the respect that they deserve. So once you stop comparing your children's behavior as a reflection of your own behavior as a parent, I think you can do so much better as a mother. So
Mhm.
once I stopped making that mistake, once I stopped looking at my failures, once I stopped looking at my children's off or erratic behavior as my failure, I found so much peace with the fact that yes, I was a good mother. I think that was a parenting mistake I made, and hopefully, thankfully, I corrected it. I had
Mhm.
friends around me who helped me correct it. But this is very important for all mothers to know, that what your child does and what your child behaves is the sum total of a lot of things. It's not
Mhm.
a reflection of you as a mother.
Okay. But there are a lot of parents who agree to disagree, could be intentionally or unintentionally. They are not ready to accept the fact that I cannot go wrong with my parenting.
Right.
So, how do you open eyes for such parents?
You can only do so much, because they're adults, and they
Mhm.
have to make up their own minds, and we just try to, like we say, we agree to disagree.
Mhm.
That your if so this usually happens in the context of kids and their friends.
Mhm.
So I don't agree with a certain thing that a child is saying, and then I go and talk to the parents about it,
Mhm.
and then the parent disagrees with me and says that this is not what we believe in our house, or this is not what we are taught in our house. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, but that's in your house.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily have to imply the same in all other houses as well.
Mhm.
So if that's okay with you, let's just agree to disagree and keep our kids separate. So this is what usually happens. But I feel like at the end of the day, we have to let go of this controlling behavior. Like, we cannot control everything. As much as we'd like to, we cannot control everything. So as
Mhm.
much, we just do the best we can. We just do the best that our kids can do in the circumstances that they are in.
Mhm.
And then the rest is up to God. The rest is up, we just hope for things to be better. And like I said, if they're not going the way that you want them to go, wait for it to sort of maybe get better, because even we could go wrong. Maybe even we are wrong, or maybe if it falls apart, wait for your kids to come back to you and say that they made a
Mhm.
mistake, and you're there for them and you're there to support them.
Okay. One last one.
Yep.
What's your biggest hope that you have for your sons when they are men?
My biggest hope for my kids, and my sons in particular, is that they grow up always believing in gender equality. That's the most important thing that I try to put across in every aspect of my parenting. My family tries to put across in every aspect of our parenting. I try to put it across in their school, amongst their teachers, amongst their friends, that they have to know that it is their responsibility to break gender stereotypes, to
Mhm.
smash the patriarchy, to not be toxic men, and to believe in gender equality. So all my efforts are directed in that direction. And hopefully, by the time they're adults, they have realized that and they choose to go ahead with life believing in gender equality.
Wow, that's brilliant. Let's play a quick rapid fire.
Sure.
If your son asks for Instagram at the age of 13, is it a yes or a no?
No, because it's legally not allowed. So definitely no.
What
They're
if
not
they?
even getting phones at 13. They're getting phones only after 16.
Ha, it's at your house.
Yeah, it's at my house. But
Okay.
for every parent out there, let me tell you, if your children are asking for Instagram accounts, please tell them that it's legally not allowed until they turn 16.
Super. He gets into a fight at school. How do you first react?
I try to find out the cause of the fight, what happened, and just try to uh, tell them that a fight is not the right way to resolve things. It's better to talk things out.
Okay. He asks for an expensive gadget as a need. Would you buy it or make him earn it?
Make him earn it for sure. Not buying it, not giving in to those expensive demands ever. You have to earn it.
Okay. He wants to quit a sport that he's been into for the longest. Would you want him to push towards it or just ask him to drop?
I'd try to understand the reasons behind why he wants to quit the sport and then try to work around them. But if he is very determined, then definitely help him quit it and find
Okay.
better use of that time.
He confesses about a small lie about his grades. Would you forgive and forget or dig deeper?
Dig deeper because I'd want to understand why he had to lie in the first place.
He wants to give up studies after 10th grade. Yes or a no?
Definitely not. I am that traditional parent who wants her sons to be doctors and engineers, and we are working towards that. So,
Okay.
no dropping of studies anytime, anywhere, anyhow.
Okay. If he's not expressing his feelings to you,
Hmm.
how would you ask him to? Or what would you do?
As long as he's expressing those feelings to somebody within our trusted circle, I'm okay with that because all kids go through a phase when they don't want to express their feelings towards a mother. I'll just make myself happy with the fact that maybe he's just going through that phase. And as long as he has a safe space to express his feelings, I'm okay with it.
Wow, wonderful. I really love the conversation that we had today. I think most important thing that I've learned is it's first connecting before correcting.
Right.
And that's a very big value add that a parent should take away from this.
Yes.
And lots of other small learnings, nitty-gritties here and there.
Yes.
So I hope they all pick it up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I really feel like the one message that I want to give out to all parents everywhere is that, of course, parenting is a very serious business, but don't take it so seriously. The most important thing is that you enjoy your journey as a parent and you always trust your instincts as a parent. As long as we remember that, everything is going to be great. Thank you so
Wow.
much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Namrata.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namrata, for being such a wonderful guest. Your learnings and value adds were great, and I hope a lot of parents pick from this. Most important thing, connection before correction, which is most important. Parents, please choose this.